This episode is brought to you in part by Museum of the Bible and its new worship experience, All Creation Sings, made in partnership with Creator. Step into an immersive room with vibrant visuals, soundscapes of praise, and interactive displays illuminating the story of worship. Get tickets at museumofthebible.org/ACS.
Before we begin today's episode, I want to advise caution. Today's conversation includes discussion about bullying and suicide and could be triggering to some listeners. Welcome to the Grace Enough podcast. I am your host, Amber Cullum. September in the U.S. is Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month. This is my first time discussing suicide on the show, so I wanted to invite someone who spoke directly to Grace Enough's purpose. God can use any story to impact His kingdom. Yes, it requires surrender and trust, but His grace is enough. Keri Spring lost her son Greg to suicide, and today she shares about the bullying he experienced, her journey of forgiveness, and the Gregory Spring Perseverance Scholarship Fund she founded in his honor. Our conversation is raw and tender and certainly points to the nearness of God during intense suffering. As you listen, if you or anyone you know is experiencing suicidal thoughts or emotional distress, call 988 for help. Good afternoon, Keri, and welcome to the Grace Enough podcast.
Thank you for having me today.
I am looking forward to our conversation as we are going to be talking about something near and dear to your heart because it's part of your personal family experience. But before we dive into that, will you share a little bit of your faith journey with us, how you came to know Christ early on, whenever that may be?
Sure. I was fortunate. I was raised in a Christian home. We kind of joke a little bit about it as I was raised in the Baptist church. So, we were saved 15 times every time we went just to make sure that we were saved. But,
at every youth camp, right?
Yep. Every youth camp, every summer, just to make sure that God heard us. But, it was a blessing to, go to church on Wednesdays and Sundays and Sunday evenings. And until we became teenagers and we realized that, we talked our parents into allowing us to play sports and not have to go on the Wednesdays and Fridays and Saturdays, Sundays, whenever they had an event going on. But now I see the benefit of what it gave me as the foundation of my faith. So I'm so grateful. We did the Awanas and the church and all that, you remember, but it well equipped me, including the camps. So as I was growing up, just memorizing the verses, learning some of the biblical stories. And probably at that time, I would say I probably didn't digest too much of what it all was. But as I began to walk into adulthood, that foundation really stuck with me as I began my married life and my career.
Yeah. I mean, it is so true. It's like we talk about as adults that what we put in is what forms us. And then in the same breath, sometimes we complain about all the things like, oh, they drug me to church all the time, or my parent, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, whatever we do forms us. So it is a great testimony when that is your story. Well, your family experienced a life-changing event that none of us want to experience or look forward to or any of those things. And that is the loss of your son, Greg, to suicide. Share a little bit about your family life prior to that. What was it like? What were your family dynamics?
My husband and I was married young, I'll be honest. I was married at 18. He was 24. And it was about, I think on our second anniversary, somewhere around there, when we had our daughter, Julianne, who's 28 now, which is hard to believe.
Wow.
And then Greg came 18 months later. So, it was a little busy
hectic
in our house early on. Yeah, it was, growing up. But what it did is it just developed them as becoming best friends growing up. And then, around our house, we were a high-end sports family. Usually soccer to basketball to softball or baseball. So it was year round. We were always going someplace. I coached the kids quite a bit. And my husband was always the one that was out doing the, either the hunting or working in the wood shop or whatever it was with our son. And we're a family that makes maple syrup. So it was
that's so
always
fun.
busy. Yeah. It was
Now, do you live in
busy around the house.
Virginia?
No, I live in New York State. So,
Okay.
but we have a sugar shack. We still do it today. So from an early age, that's what our kids knew to do. And what was, probably one of the greatest blessings we have is there was always kids at our house. And we remembered, some of the kids saying after Greg passed is we always liked hanging at your house because you were a family that didn't fight. And there was a mom and a dad there. And there was always food on the table and no questions asked. And so, it was just, and that was the environment. And when we began to reflect on that, we're like, yeah, that's part of our legacy because there was only a few homes that these group of kids could go to and have that stability. And we knew as parents that we wanted to continue to provide that to the neighborhood kids.
Okay. And so were you an athlete yourself? I mean, you said you grew up playing sports, but that can mean a whole host of things.
I was. I actually did soccer, basketball, and softball, and I had scholarships to go to college. Which in the end, I did one semester of playing, and then I decided that I had one too many concussions, so I gave it up and said I better use my brain for my
other
education.
things.
Yeah. And other things. And that's when my husband is like, I'd rather have kids young so that we can enjoy them and then eventually enjoy grandkids someday. So I gave up my sports, but coaching kind of brought that a little bit alive to me. So
yeah. I know. I mean, I say that because I played basketball and not in college, but for years, obviously growing up. And I sometimes have thought like, oh, I think I'd enjoy coaching basketball. I don't know for sure if I would, but I certainly love the game. So I think coaching your kids would be very, very enjoyable.
Yes.
Well, share as much as you feel comfortable with about the day and the few days after, just the circumstances surrounding the loss of your son.
So one of the things to know, about Greg is he was growing up about second grade. He was diagnosed with Tourette's. Now, for most people, there's extremes of Tourette's, and for Greg, it was mild tics, and for learning in the classroom, there was a lot we put in place. Repetition was his way, and we had I don't want to say battled, but we had gone back and forth with doctors as they placed limitations that he would never play sports, he would never do this, never do that, and we're like, I'm going to give him every opportunity to do it,
right?
And in fact, in second grade, he was the goalie for the state hockey team that won. So, it was like limitations. Like, I'm not going to expect him to do things that are way out of the ordinary, but I'm also not going to put limitations on him. I'm going to let him
and not try.
Yeah, I'm going to let him try and see where he succeeds. So, with that said, bullying began at an early age. But the sports were his outlet where he had a group of friends that were like, no, we want him on our team. So it was like the positive aspect of his life. So, all the way through as parents, we knew we had to kind of balance the Tourette's, the athletic standpoint, keep our eye on him for, what was going on in the world around him. And things were going good. And of course, he had a little bit older sister that all her friends and everything were like big protectors of him. But as he began to get in junior high and high school, the bullying continued to get worse. But the thing that we didn't pick up on right away is how good he was at covering it up. Because one of the things that Greg always did was he had a smile on his face from morning till night. You hardly ever knew that anything was bothering him, because what we found out later is it was his way of covering up his pain, even to us. So, getting into high school and, like I said, soccer season, he was a starter on varsity at a younger age than most kids. And he started and played the whole game. He was just naturally talented in sports and hunting and, using his hands in the wood shop and electrical welding, that kind of stuff. But leading up to, the day of his passing, he was playing on a travel soccer league, and it was interesting because that season Now, mind you, these are 17-year-old boys.
Right.
They had asked me to coach. And
wow.
Yeah, it was quite amazing. I was like, oh boy. And they had a coach that couldn't make all the games, so we kind of co-coached when we could, because I was also with my daughter's older team. And I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. Like we really want me to do this. And we had a great season. I mean, really the difference between boys and girls are the sounds they make and the smell. Those are really the difference. But
listen, I have a boy and a girl, so I know that to be true.
Yeah. But as far as coaching and the desire to learn and the respect that they gave me was a great experience that I'd never thought in my coaching years that I would even experience. And we had a great season. And so it was Father's Day, and it happened to be a weekend where both the kids played. My daughter played in a tournament and he played down in a different town. And we came back and we said, hey, let's go see my dad. Let's go see my husband's dad. And we all went up, just had a great day, and it just, everybody, it was a winning tournament. It was a winning game. And we just celebrated. We celebrated that the school season, or the school was almost over, and that we were heading on vacation in a couple of weeks to Myrtle Beach, which is one of their favorite spots to ever go. And, it was a great weekend. I mean, it was just like a typical family weekend for all of us, and really nothing different out of the ordinary.
Right.
And the next day, we got up, and there again, Gino's dad, so his grandpa had a few strokes, and it limited what he could do. And Greg was normal to go up there and help him out with chores around the house. And so he had gotten up that day, and he's like,
so pause for a second. Did your father-in-law lived within like walking distance of your home or
driving distance? Yeah. He lived within 5 miles of us. So he got up and he's like, hey, Grandpa needs my help. Can I go up? And, I'm like, yeah, our ABC done. And, you don't have, at that time they had final exams, but they only went for final exams, and then they could be off the rest of the day. So I'm like, yeah, sure. And so he went up there and he helped him all day long, just there again, a typical day. He responded to our texts, and everything went good. And then it went radio silent about 3:00. And we didn't think much, because if he went up in the woods, a lot of times he would go up in the woods on his 4-wheeler, just typical stuff. And then he would respond a few hours later. And about 6:00, when we hadn't heard from him in 3 hours, we were like, this is odd. So we called my father-in-law, and he's like, gosh, what time is it? I haven't seen him in a few hours either. And that's when our alarms went off. Like, what is going on? Did he roll over on the ATV? Did he, what happened? And, that you have that gut instinct, and my husband and I both had it. We knew that something had happened. And one thing about Tourette's was things are impulsive. And so we got up, and about 4 hours later, my husband and I found our son had taken his own life. And, it was hindsight. I can say that I'm thankful that my husband and I were the ones to find him. As heart-wrenching and as difficult as it was to remove that image from our minds for a couple of years, it gave us the closure that we would eventually need through the process of healing in it all.
This episode is brought to you in part by Beyond Ordinary Women Ministries, which prepares Christian women for leadership. At BOW, we believe that every woman is a leader because she influences someone. So, whom do you influence? Do you mentor a woman? Serve in the workplace? Or do you lead a small group, teach the Bible, or even lead an entire ministry? No matter who or how many you influence, our free online resources will help equip you. Our videos, podcast episodes, and articles from experienced women leaders will encourage you and perfect your leadership skills. They offer wisdom for dealing with ministry pitfalls, current biblical issues, health for your own soul, and insights for shepherding others well. In addition, BOW offers Bible studies designed to connect women of multiple generations. They provide a challenge to both women new to the Bible and those wanting to dig deeper. Be our guest and browse all of our free resources and low-cost Bible studies at beyondordinarywomen.org.
So, in hindsight, can you look back now and see some signs that you didn't recognize at the time, or even now you look back and you're like, No.
As far as suicidal signs, no. We
Yeah.
never had, we had conversations with them of, both our kids, like, suicide is not the answer. We're like, don't choose a permanent solution for a temporary problem, and they were very clear on that stuff. We could look back on hindsight and say, we knew he was bullied. Should have we taken him to counseling more? Should have we pushed a little bit more and maybe charge some of the kids that were bullying when nobody else would do anything? Should have we done different things in that aspect? Yes, we can look back and say that. Would have it changed the outcome?
Who knows?
Who knows?
That's right.
We can't look at that. But as far as him, we had never heard of him speak about suicide. We'd never had any indication or it was like a total blindside when it came to suicide. The only thing that we knew was it was impulsive, and what messages he received in that day is unknown to us. And if he impulsed off of a bullying situation, we could put together with Tourette's that was a potential ending.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I mean, because it is such an interesting thing when you start to think about like, wow, what led to this? And you don't have answers, right? Like I think that would be the hardest part.
Yeah.
For a loss of suicide is wanting answers and not having them. Would you say that's one of the hardest things that you experienced?
Oh, absolutely. And we have no note, we have no messages, we have there's nothing out there to explain that. And I'll even share this, that there was so many conversations that I had with God, like, why my son? Why, there's one person in this world that could have stopped that. And that's God. Like, he could have changed the outcome. He could have made sure that the gun was locked up. He could have, all these scenarios that me as a person on earth could come up with a solution. But the reality is God's the only one that could have stopped it. And for some reason, he chose not to. And going in even, and this, I mean, for our listeners, some may have heard me say this, but I questioned God. I was like, God, this kid is, drug overdose 3 times. They brought him back with a Narcan pen, and this one did this, and this one did this. Why didn't you take him? Why'd you take my son? Wasn't my home good enough? Wasn't this? Wasn't that?
Right. I think those are all normal responses.
Yeah. And this is where it goes back to being brought up and having a foundation of faith. Is God said to me, and it was loud and clear, and I don't question God anymore, is he said to me, I knew where Greg was coming, and he was coming home. I don't know where those others are coming, so it's your job to go witness to them.
Oh.
And at that point in our journey of healing, in our journey of grieving, even still, because there are still hard days, even 9 years out.
Oh,
is
absolutely.
What I learned is I know those questions I still have, but I don't care anymore about the answers. Because it's not going to change the fact that Greg is in heaven and never coming back to earth in his arms. So for me, it's a closure on those questions. It's just, I trust God with his decision is now the answer to those that I accept.
Well, and would you say also that, and you kind of said this earlier, it's not that those questions never come to mind, but now you rest firmly on a truth in order to kind of shut those up, that they're just that we naturally experience those.
Yeah. Oh, it's a natural experience. And even like, my daughter getting married a few days ago, or what is it, 10 days ago now, those questions pop back up, like, Greg, you should be experiencing this great. Yeah, you missed a great party. Like, it was awesome, and your sister was beautiful, and yet I trust God for when he took my son home. And another concept that God really laid on my heart and allowing me to settle with it was, I asked for a son and a daughter. I truly wanted one of each, and he granted me that request. But I didn't say I want them forever. He didn't give me a time plate when they were born. And I have to accept what I was given. And he, kind of this thought process of, if I told you when your son was born that you would only have him for 17 and a half years, would have you still wanted him?
I don't know.
Yes.
I want to say the answer.
100%. I would say yes, because I trust God with his life, and I trust God with the fact that the reason he gave me Greg was because I would be strong enough to go through this and help other people. And I'm so thankful for the life he did give me, because he could have not given me any children.
Mm-hmm.
He could have said, sorry, I don't think you could handle it, or sorry, you don't deserve one. Whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Well, and this is that situation where a dear friend of mine, Cindy, when I was really struggling with something a few years back, she was like, that's the thing. We receive the grace that we need when we walk through the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't even have that amount of grace at this point in my life because I haven't walked through something like you have walked through. And I might not ever. I hope that I don't.
I pray you don't.
Absolutely. But you can see people who've gone through a lot of various traumatic experience look back in hindsight and say something very similar to what you just said. And then I'm sitting on this side of the mic going, I don't know if I would look at God and say I would take him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think if I were in your spot, yeah, absolutely, because I would still want my baby.
Mm-hmm.
The
memories
that's right.
never end. I'm telling you, you look and say, what did he accomplish? And it never ends. It never ends.
Wow. Yeah. Well, so tell me this, if you, and if your daughter would feel comfortable, how did she deal with, obviously you don't know every internal thought that she has, but, I know it had to be incredibly difficult for her.
The interesting aspect to my daughter is, one, she had just finished her freshman semester at college and was living there to work there in the summer. So for her, the instant thing was, I wasn't there to protect him.
Yeah. So the guilt.
Second part is she was a forensic science major.
Oh.
And then going into receiving her master's in intelligence. So she was in a position of, sometimes you can know too much information or have seen too much stuff.
Amen.
So we really had to step back and come up with a plan of attack for the first year of putting guidelines in place to say, as a family, this is what's going to happen. We're not going to, for her, change her major. We're going to make sure that things stay the same. No major life changes are going to happen for a year. We will put support in places for school. Yeah, just different things. We're going to, a counselor will be available. I actually coached soccer at the school because she was on the soccer team, and, put my place so I'd be on the away games to make sure that, she had support in place that way. And just different things that we put in place so that if she needed to have that support, it was available for her. And, just remind her that you can overcome this and it's not her fault. And, part of that, if I could get into this a little bit, wasn't just the fact that Greg passed away. It's what people did directly after he passed that can just absolutely drive people insane and make it worse. And, for our situation, when you deal with bullying and suicide and the whole mix of that, it just opens the door, especially with social media, with texting and a 24/7 access to your kids and in the world.
And if I'm not mistaken, this happened like right during a time when bullying was really starting to come front and center. Am I correct with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So feel free to share as much or as little as you would like.
Yeah. So less than 24 hours after he passed, the funeral home had put up the condolence page, where people could go in, and we had family all over the country and just spread out. And one of the bullies put, "Ha, he's dead. I hope he's in hell," as the condolence to us. And the funeral home missed it, and the post went through without being proved. And, when you read that, and mind you, at that time, we didn't initially read anything. We had it screened, but at that point they brought it through and said, you need to see this. And we took a screenshot. And at the time, it just killed us inside. But now
and made you angry, I'm sure, because that would have sent me through the roof.
Yeah. And, for us, though, it was a gift from God because he gave us an inkling of, one, just how much Greg went through that we didn't know about. It also gave us an inkling of the world that we were living in far outside the small little town we lived in and what people are capable of. But most importantly, how we needed to forgive as Christians and act out our faith. And that, of course, was the hardest part. But so, that had happened like right away. And obviously I'm not perfect. I made mistakes and this didn't happen overnight, but those are just some of the things. So that took place. So then we decided, okay, we're only taking messages from people we can trust. Like, we're going to get rid of some of this so that we can digest and do this. And then we got some messages in from Christians that said, hey, God won't give you more than you can handle. You'll be just fine, right? That old cliche that nobody wants to hear in the time of turmoil, right? Then they're like, why did you
give Greg... It makes my skin crawl, Keri.
Wait. Why did you give Greg a gun? Like, he was certified to hunt. Like, he went to training class. Like I don't need to hear that right after. Like, it's
and he's 17 years old.
17 years old. Like,
don't you all live in upper New York, right?
Yeah. And we do syrup. He knows the woods like the back of his hand.
People just
and then I had one that come back. It gets better. Went to a psychic and the psychic said everything's going to be all right. I'm like, psychic? What we don't do psychics. And then this one is the one that was just heartbreaking for us. Not only hurtful, but heartbreaking. As they said, what sin have you committed that God is punishing you for?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
whoever is listening, none of these things are biblical.
No, none of them. And I'm like, so our circle at that point shrunk and we said, nobody in. Like, we have to, right? And so, I say these things not to say, shame on you. Like, I'm not calling people out, but as Christians, we need to be supportive, not hindering to people that are grieving and loss of anything. It doesn't matter if it's a child or, a parent or whatever the situation is. Like think before you speak or think before you text on your phone. So,
well, I think people, real quick, just feel like they need to say something. And I always encourage people, then just say, I am so sorry for your loss.
Amen,
I'm
sister.
praying. Or say nothing and give a hug and drop off a meal. Just that's enough. That's it. I'm thinking about you.
Can there be more of you so we can duplicate it?
Well, I think I've said some things that have hurt people in the past, but I think as you get older, you start paying attention. But what I've learned is that's not true, because I know 50 and 60 and 70-year-old people who say this. And I'm like, we have to learn.
Yeah.
That doesn't help.
No.
It hurts.
It hurts. And you think about, as you grow in your faith, you rely on other sisters and brothers in Christ to help you through these situations. And they're hurting you almost as bad as the other ones. And you're going, am I living in this crazy world? And how am I going to get out of it? Yeah. I'm like, oh, whoa. So, so those type of things. And this all happened within a week.
Oh my gosh.
Before we even had the funeral. So thank God I had my faith and my foundation, because what God had really spoken to us, because obviously we were not sleeping. Half the time we couldn't get people out of our house until, we booted them out, which I appreciate. That's not a, unappreciative thing. It was just when you're exhausted and you can't think, you just want space. Is he reminded us of Colossians 3:13. We have to forgive by faith out of obedience. And he also really reminded us, and this was probably tougher than the forgiveness, is that the truth will set you free. So at this point, nobody knew whether it was suicide or not. There were rumors, as you can imagine, floating through, right? We're the only ones that
knew,
saw.
But not everybody else knew.
Yeah, we knew, but nobody else knew, because we had screened people off. So just the firemen and the policemen that were there, that was it. So we decided 3 things before we could have the service. And the first one is we very publicly and intentionally said that it was suicide and it was a poor choice. And this is why, and actually had the service based on don't wait. to accept Christ type of a service on it. We wanted to be truthful. And then the next thing we did is we had to forgive that funeral home host and others that were hurting us. And that was tough in that moment, but not as tough as the final thing is. We had to forgive Greg.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah, we had to say, Greg, we forgive you, because no matter what led up to that moment, and we don't even know all of it, he made that final choice. Like, nobody else was standing with him making that final choice. And whether it was conscious one, unconscious one, whether it was rattled just with everything flying through his head or through his phone or whatever it was, he still made that final choice, and we had to forgive our son. And we had to do it before we could have the service, in order to be able to have a service and have a home where we could also witness to all his friends and all a whole community that was just reeling and not understanding.
Right.
And so we made that happen before. And it was, we did it, but we still processed for the coming months, but it made that initial forgiveness and a start to healing.
So I'm going to ask a tough question, and please feel free to, but do you find yourself ever, even now, having to go back and forgive again?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially big moments, like the wedding. I had to have my nephew walk us down, who was one of Greg's best buddies. He was, I think there was 10 years difference between the two of them, but every time Eric needed something, hey, Greggy, come help me. And they act so much alike. They look alike. I mean, it's just amazing, the two. And, so I had said, no, I can't walk alone. I just can't do it. And so he graciously did that. But I said, Greg, it's killing me here.
Yeah.
Like I want it to be you.
Yeah.
And walk through the forgiveness again for not being there.
And I point that out because I think, again, well-meaning Christians can sometimes say things about forgiveness that just aren't true.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you didn't forgive someone if you have to do it over and over again.
Right.
It just means the offense has come back up.
Yep.
Your heart is broken.
Yep.
You're angry again. And you take it back to God and you forgive again. I mean,
just like God
that's
forgives
right.
us.
It's a confession thing. That's all that it is.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Well, tell me, when you talk or when you think about parents who, I mean, there's two different parents we could address here. Parents who have walked the path that you have walked, and parents who are clueless and wonder, could this be my child? Do you have anything that you would say to one or both of those parents?
One thing that we had close with Greg, and even, we did every night, we talked to him. We still had the situation happen, but we knew what was going on in his life, like as far as his schedule, what he was doing, if something bothered him that day, as far as, a test or things like that. We had that open line of communication. The thing that we probably needed to improve is maybe listening a little bit more and not making it so routine about schedule and school and test and things like that. So I would encourage and, maybe listen instead of asking more questions, and really use that time a little more efficiently looking back. But we do value those conversations, because even today, we a lot of times reflect on those and are glad that we have them, because every night before he went to bed, he told us he loved us and good night. And we knew what the next day was. Not everyone has that. I would also say, teach your kids about Christ, because nobody's guaranteed tomorrow. Nobody knows what's going to happen, good, bad, and different, whether it's a car accident, whether you're not there and there's nobody else to leave your faith, because then that you'll see your child again. Like, I know I will see Greg again, despite the circumstances. The other thing, when it comes to suicide, whether it's from bullying, whether it's from depression, anxiety, whatever the thing is seek counseling, because there are things that can help. Sometimes people need medication. Some people need a diagnosis. And Greg was both. He had medicine for his Tourette's. He did see a counselor. Did we do it enough? There's a lot of things we can go back and say maybe not.
Right.
We can't. But at least make an attempt. And the other thing that I would highly encourage, especially out of ours, was don't allow others to be the dictator of what is done in circumstances. And what I mean by that is if your kid's getting bullied, and you're just going to trust the police or the schools to make sure that the bullying stops or the discipline is proper for the others, don't. You're your child's best advocate. And you need to follow up and make sure. I didn't know that things weren't happening properly. I didn't know that things weren't really being taken care of because I just assume when they're in their care, they take care of things, right?
Well, and you're not a mama bear, right? Like, we criticize those people sometimes, like, stop always running in and rescuing. And that's hard. There's a tension of, oh, when do I need to go and when do I need to not? And I don't think you made the right or the wrong decision. Hindsight is 2020.
Yeah. And know your laws. Like, know what your disability laws are, know what your IEP laws are, know what your what the laws are within the school if bullying does happen. Like New York State has a new law in that they have to report it online. You can report it online. So there's a lot of things out there. Educate yourself because you're going to be your child's best advocate. And if you have an inkling, call the suicide hotline, find out what there's out there and find out what immediate sources there are in your area and take your child there and get help.
I really love that because you are a person who you had communication with your kid. And obviously not everyone does that, but it still happened. And that's where the Christ piece comes in, because I think some people listening may be like, yeah, but it still happened to you. Yes, because life is not a formula. Parenting is not a formula. What happens to our children is not, if I do X, Y, and Z, then they're going to do X, Y, or A, B, and C. Like, it's just not the way it works.
No.
And we want to believe that. And I think Christians are the worst. Like, raise a child up in the way he should go and he will not depart from it. I'm like, well, yes, but we take that out of context a little bit, right? Like,
or they forget about James when it says you will face trials and struggles, and they forget about that aspect.
Right. And that's the thing. When I'm saying this, I'm not mocking the word of God. I'm saying, like, we can't slap Bible verses on things because there's a whole lifetime of 24 hours a day caring for people, and decisions change, and we do things right and we do things wrong. And so let's not act like there's a formula for it.
Yeah. No, there's no formula.
Absolutely. And so it is, you're right. Like, teaching them about Christ from a young age, to where even though you're suffering on the earth without him, you'll be reunited with Greg one day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so tell me, right. I know. Gives us hope, doesn't it? Well, I know you've set up this scholarship fund, and I want to make sure I don't mess it up. Gregory, he goes by Gregory, right?
Yep.
Spring Perseverance
Scholarship Fund.
Scholarship Fund. So tell us a little bit about that, why you set it up, what it does, how you go about distributing that, all the things.
This is my heartbeat. I'll be honest. This is what I love. One of the things Greg was a kid always helping others. Like, if there was a kid in needed their tire changed, he could do it. If they needed something welded together, he would do it. If a teacher wanted a napkin holder made for Christmas, he was on it. That's just how the kid was. And he was also an entrepreneur that would take our maple syrup and sell it out of his locker and never let us know about it. So we have some great memories about that. But and he played travel sports. So, hockey and that, we had some travel programs where kids all around the community were. And so we had said that we wanted to continue sharing and really pouring into the lives of our youth in the area and start a scholarship fund. But we also wanted it to be a preference to kids going into trade, because Greg was going to be a welder. He had already been certified as an adult, but he loved working with his hands. He can make just about anything. So we kind of got that as the foundation of how can we make this happen? And then what school districts would we include? And so we went out and we started thinking about it. And I'm like, I was a Portville graduate. That's near Olean and Allegheny. He played with kids on those teams. And then we have a couple of small schools, Hinsdale and Frankenville and Elkville, and then all kind of like within a short mile radius. And I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. So we started doing the fundraising. And what is so cool about what God does is first couple years, you do the good old, chicken barbecue, get the raffles going, all that stuff. There's so much work and you're going, and we gave out $2,000. So we gave out like $500 scholarships. And we're like, we're doing this, man, it's a lot of work. We're doing it,
Girl, you work in ministry. You should know all about that.
Absolutely. But here's how God works. He knew our heartbeat, and somebody made a connection with the Buffalo Sabres hockey team organization.
Wow.
And we now do the 50-50. And we have given in 8 years, because we had to build our fund for a little bit. Catch this, $42,000 away in scholarships.
That's so awesome.
So we work games, and now God has actually opened the door, which is absolutely amazing, because of the reputation we've held over the years, where it's Buffalo Bills, Buffalo Sabres, Buffalo Amherst. We have basically, they need it, they call us in. The big games, they call us in. And I love it, because they're like, you guys changed the stadium. You guys changed the arena. There's something different about you. It's our faith. And we got these volunteers that are amazing. They all believe in us. I mean, this last year we gave $9,000 away in 1 year.
So awesome.
And during COVID, we doubled our amount instead of took away.
Awesome.
And so it's just.
And in New York.
And in New York. Exactly. We'll probably get taxed to death, but it's in New York. So yeah, but it's just seeing God take, and yes, it's a horrendous situation losing my son, but he's allowed us to say yes to his calling and use it as a platform to not only share our faith, because everybody knows about our faith, and including the recipients, but also pour into the lives of these kids. So we encourage, enable, and empower these students to choose higher education, preferably in a trade, but we do, have other areas they can go into, especially if they persevere through a situation.
Right.
And make something of their lives in their field and believe in themselves. And I'll share this one thank you we got. This one young man wrote us a note after the fact and said, "You believed in me, so I believed in myself, and now I have my degree."
Wow, what a gift. Yeah. And I mean, that's the legacy you were talking about of Greg earlier, right? Like,
amen.
It keeps giving. Do you raise some awareness, some suicide awareness through it as well?
Absolutely. We not only do it in the letters we give the kids, we do have bullying and suicide prevention. Sometimes I go out and talk on it. I have my own podcast with it, but we link in with different organizations. A lot of what we do is, I don't want to say behind the scenes, but they're just like, parents will call us. People know people that want to need help. So we're out there quite a bit with doing those programs. We've linked in with the suicide walks, out of the darkness walks, I think is what the one's called. So we are linked into a lot of foundations and things that are already set in place. Because I said, why reinvent the wheel? We'll just participate in these. And it has been
good for you.
So rewarding. Yeah, it has.
I feel like we reinvent the wheel way too much.
Yeah.
Because we want our own thing.
Yeah. My husband and I say it all the time, even when we're up in the stadiums, it's not, in everything we do, we just have Greg's name on it. We don't want any credit. It's not Gino and Keri that are doing this. This is Christ doing it. And it's seeing the church work in the community.
Wow. I absolutely love that. And I just feel like, even just through this conversation, like, I can see your passion. Not everybody else can see that, but your faithfulness to keep walking a path where it's so easy to feel sad for a long time, to live in despair for a long time. And so you have not allowed those feelings to really take control of you, and that is Christ in you. And so what an honor to have you on the show. Before we go, what is the name of your show?
The Real Raw Truth Podcast.
The Real Raw Truth.
Yeah, Real Raw Truth Podcast with Robbie Raw. And we're going to be getting you on.
Awesome. I would love it. So thank you so much, Keri, for being here today. I'm grateful that you are willing and continuing to share Greg's story.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Don't forget, if you or anyone you know is experiencing suicidal thoughts or emotional distress, call 988 for help. If this conversation is one you found encouraging, I would be grateful if you would share it with a friend.
Thank you for listening to the Grace Enough podcast. Tune in next time.